Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this week's History Speaks, we've got a guest that will captivate and enthrall us all with her educational programme and quite possibly, more importantly, the guided tours she runs throughout London, bringing alive the age of the Tudors. She's been in education now for about 25 years, and as a joint partner in the More Curriculum educational programme, she has set high standards to bring historical education to even more people. So please give a warm welcome to my guest today, Yvette Reinfor. Hi Yvette, how are you?
Hi John, I'm fine. A little bit nervous, but very, very excited. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you.
You don't need to be nervous, Yvette. You know, this is the first time we've both met, so it's exactly the same for me as it is for you. I was just thinking, before we get on to your questions, out of all the things you've done over the years, teaching, and now you're doing these kind of tours and stuff, which we'll get into, how daunting was it when you first went out on the road with a bunch of strangers?
To be honest, it's very challenging and more daunting than teaching. You know, similar aspects because you are planning like a lesson plan and you plan to deliver some content or some information. But I think with the walk, you've got sort of lots of unknowns that you can't control. So like the weather, the dynamics in the group, just things going around externally that you can't control, which you can obviously control in your classroom. So things like roadwork. So you've got a fantastic walk planned and you turn the corner and then, oh, you can't go there. There's roadworks or there's a film crew, especially in the City of London. So it is challenging. I really do enjoy and very exciting at the same time. So you really have to think on your feet.
And I guess every time you go out there, even though it may be the same tour, it's a completely different situation, different people. So anything could happen, you know, when you're out there anyway.
Absolutely. And
right,
it does.
Let's get on to your questions then. So I asked this to everybody. So how did you first become interested in history and what's your background?
Okay. I've always loved history since I was a child. I just remember at school learning about the ancient Egyptians, discovering it was in Africa. So that was exciting for me. And then learning about, you know, I call it the rite of passage. So we learn about William the Conqueror and poor King Harold in 1066, the Battle of Hastings, and then goes on to Richard III, the princes, and Henry VIII. So it always fascinated me. I studied history at GCSE, A-level, and Caribbean studies at university. So I always had an interest in understanding the world we live in, not only in the present, but in the past. And I had a sort of weird fascination with the Russian Revolution. So the Bolsheviks, the Mensheviks, provisional government, I'm always fascinated by it. And people don't tend to know what I'm talking about when I mention it. And around sort of adolescence, so 14, 15, was interested in African history and read an amazing book by someone called Chancellor Williams called The Destruction of African Civilization. And that led me to dig deeper into my background, being African Caribbean, and just found the whole looking at history just really, really important for understanding the present. So that was, I always had a love of history, and then it just led me into just following my love of history into different avenues and different vehicles. And I think that's all I can say at this point.
It sounds like you've been on a very exciting journey. And I can imagine stepping into the world of historical tours must have brought its own set of unique experiences and challenges. So it must have been quite a shift, especially when you've already had such a long career in education anyway. So how did you first get involved in these historical tours?
So I worked in education for the last 12, 13 years. I always worked in quality assurance or teaching and learning. So I was the person who was supporting the teachers, doing the observations and checking learning was of the appropriate standard. So I was a little bit jaded with education, and I was always looking for opportunities to see education in different light. So I used to volunteer for Open House London, and they every weekend, a weekend in September, they used to open up buildings and have walks, and I was always volunteer with something to do with education, and did that for about 6 years for them. And then in 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, they discovered they wanted more Black narratives, And because I had studied the transatlantic slave trade, because I had studied Caribbean studies, I wanted a different narrative. And I came across a book about Black Tudors by someone called Miranda Kaufman. And then I discovered there was another historian who had written a book called Oneka Nubia. And I thought this was a really, really interesting phase of British history, because through the years of me learning Tudor history, I was unaware there were Black people in Britain. So I approached Open House and said I'd like to create a tour about Black Tudors in Westminster. And I linked it to Tudor architecture, because there are bits of Tudor architecture in Westminster. And I curated this walk in 2020, and it was really, really popular. And then I did the walk again in 2021, and again it was popular. And I thought, let's look at some other walks I can do. And I created a second walk, and it was the same about Black Tudors, but this time we were in Southwark, and we were looking at the age of exploration to trade, and it was just the Southwark riverside, and again talking about some Black Tudors. And they proved to be very popular, the walks, and people saying, are you doing some more? And they were a bit frustrated that it was just restricted to Open House. So last year, August, I decided that actually I'm going to incorporate it into more curricula, because I no longer work in sixth forms. I have my own consultancy called More Curricula, and I thought it would be a great way to work with not just children, but anybody who's interested in learning about the hidden stories. And I use aspects of education. So my walks are very different to other walks. It's very teacher-like. So anybody who comes to my walk, they'll get a pack. I like to provide evidence to support what I'm saying. So it encourages critical thinking, analysis. And then I use techniques which we call transformative learning techniques, because the idea is to transform how people view the world, or their view of the world. And it's quite challenging, because the narrative that we've been given doesn't always include the stories of marginalised communities and their contribution. So it's a bit of a personal challenge when you actually have to confront what you know and what I'm providing. That's why I always provide evidence to support what I'm saying. So my walks, as I said, are very unique and very different. And I really want people to learn. And I want that learning not just to be, I want it to be quite a deep experience where it's transformative, because learning is all about transforming how you think and you feel. So that's what my walks are about. But they are fun at the same time as well. So there is a pedagogical sort of foundation to it. But it really is about exploring hidden stories and sharing them, and just making people aware that Britain does have a diverse history. And I just want people to feel welcome. So if Britain is your home, regardless of where your parents came from, grandparents, great-grandparents, then this is part of your history that you should embrace and feel proud of.
I mean, it's interesting to hear how you adapted your teaching style from a classroom to being out and about anyway on these tours. And I imagine it must feel completely different engaging with people while surrounded by the very places where history unfolded. And it must bring a whole new level kind of excitement and challenge to how you convey those stories. So I guess my question would be, how was the transition of teaching in a classroom to teaching on the go with a tour?
Well, that transition, it was, as I said, it is challenging, and you can never get it right. So I was always I always say, even when we're teaching and when I'm supporting and mentoring teachers, that you can never get it right 100%, and you can always learn from your experiences. So it's challenging, it's exciting at the same time. I love the aspect of creating a tour, and with that tour, what I'm trying to get people to learn and to understand, making sure it's balanced, making sure that it meets the needs of everybody. But you can get it wrong sometimes. So just because I've got this perfect tour that I've written, it may be fine in my head, and then I then deliver it to a particular group and it doesn't work. So I think you always have to be flexible. You always have to appreciate that not everybody will see history through your lens. There may be some conflict where that person doesn't actually expect your delivery in that way, or what the information. So you do have some challenges. But as I said, because I enjoy it and it's very passionate sort of subject that I enjoy, and you do have the real life artifacts, so it takes you back into time. It is something that I think if you do have the little hiccups, the positives are overwhelming. So they balance out.
Yeah.
So for me, in terms of teaching, I think the transition can be challenging, but there's a lot of commonality. So when you're planning a lesson, you're planning for your learning group, and you want it to be inclusive, and you want to impart knowledge and try and find an engaging way to do it. So my Riverside walk is the shortest one. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. And I encourage parents to bring their children. And it's very sort of multi-sensory. So we talk about a silk weaver that lived in Southwark, but then we have silk that he would have weaved. And there's different types of silk, and we touch and feel it. And I try to get you to guess which is satin, which is taffeta. So we also look at the spices that were traded, and there's spices that you can actually see and touch. So that one, again, is just about making people experience history, not from me just talking, but looking at documents, touching, feeling, seeing things.
Yeah, it's very interactive, and I don't think there's any doubt from what you've already said that your passion for history and education is coming across, because it's obviously shaped much of what you do. But it does make me curious about the driving force behind it all, I guess the deeper motivation that really pushed you to pursue this unique route. So if you can, and you may have already answered this one, what most inspired you, do you think, to take this path?
I think for me, it's narratives, because there's that old saying that if you tell a lie once, it stays a lie. And if you tell a lie several times, it becomes the truth. And I think with history is written from, we say, from the victors, from one viewpoint or one lens. And there are different ways to tell a story. So when someone tells you something, they're going to put their own spin on it. They're going to interpret it differently. So for me, I felt it was really important to share the stories of these unheard voices and the marginalized people. Whether you're poor, whether you're someone of color, whether you're a woman, your story tends to be hidden or revised or misrepresented. And I think just being able to tell those stories or to share those voices, it can empower individuals where people can have courage, they can feel included, they can have more empathy. So storytelling is so important, because as mammals, we're the only ones that have this ability to tell stories and shape experiences. So for me, I want it to be not only inspiring, but also, as I said, to make people feel welcome, included, and just understanding that things really are not very different in the past now. You still have the same human emotions, the way people share things, view things, behave. And it's just getting that understanding out there. And also, as I said, it's the unheard voices that I really want to share their stories.
I think, as you say, I think times change, but people don't really. People have always been the same, whatever. Now, it does sound like you've built something really special with your tours and cruises. Here we go. It sounds like, I'll start again. It sounds like you built something really special with your tours and courses. And with all the experience and success you've had so far, I can't help wonder what the next chapter in your story will be. So how do you see the company moving forward, and what is your vision?
I mean, my vision is to keep telling these untold stories. I mean, I have sort of boxed myself into the Tudor period because I love the Tudor period. And that was the period I was particularly interested in. But I do have some other tools that I am planning. Again, I'm very interested in this whole history of the corporation. So when I was doing my research for Black Tudors, I came across the East India Company getting its charter from Elizabeth I. So I thought, that's interesting. I never knew that. And I just remember people talking about the East India Company and Clive of India, and not really understanding how it evolved or how it originated. And from there, I did some research, and then you discover that you've got this trading mercantile company that transforms itself into a dominion. And as a consequence, you've got the fueling the wars, American War of Independence. You've got the Opium Wars. You've got Bengal being robbed. And it's really, really interesting. So I'm interested in other joint corporation companies that were set up because they seem to have the same pattern. And I'm always interested in human experience. So with the exploitation, what did it do to, people? What was their experience? So I will see, I look at myself doing more hidden stories, just not linked to the Tudor period, but more, evolving from that period. So it's going to look at the Stuart period, but also I like the idea of the history of the corporation within the context of historical times as well. I also am doing some collaboration. So I've been collaborating with authors. I collaborated with Amanda, and Amanda's wrote a novel about Mary, and we did a collaboration where she was online in New York doing a discussion. I did a walk in London, and we also had Sir Loyal Hart, who dresses up as Henry VIII, and he came along. And that was really exciting to collaborate with other people who are either historians, authors interested in history, just to share the stories. And as I said, the story is multifaceted and it can be told in many ways by different people and interpreted differently. So I quite like that. I'm very excited. During half term, I am doing a collaboration with Claire Linney. She's written a book about children who travel back into time, and they interact with real life Black historical figures. So she's written a book about some called Time Tub Travellers, and they travel back to Tudor, Southwark, and they meet the Reasonable Black Man. Reasonable Black Man is a silk weaver that lived in Southwark. So we are doing a collaboration where I'm doing an interactive walk, which is a bit of an adventure mystery walk, and the children will interact with a character in Claire's book, and they'll solve a mystery of trying to find a silk thief, which is the theme of the book. And at the end, they will be given a copy of her book as well. So that's an interesting collaboration because, again, it's working directly with children. The walk has been curated for children, so it's going to be fun with history thrown in, but not in the way when I do my walks. And I also plan to work with J.G. Williams, and she's writing a series of books about murder mysteries set in Tudor London. And her first book is set in Southwark. So we're looking at doing something for adults. So there will be a fun side as well. My newest book is a Tudor Queen sing-along. So that is just singing, fun, and again, trying to get teenagers or preteens who like history, like the Tudor Queens, to visit historical sites, but have a sing-along along the way. And that's inspired by the musical Six. So there's so many different avenues that you can take the walks to make it fun and engaging while still learning. So that's where I see the direction going, where more collaborations, telling hidden stories, and also trying to look for fun ways to engage children, adults in learning history.
Now, I'd love to hear more about some of the kind of standout experiences you've had along the way. So could you give us a little bit of background on maybe one or two of the courses, one or two of the tours you've been on, that maybe something's happened or something that's just added to the tour as a whole, if that makes sense?
Okay. So just to recap, I do 9 tours. I do 3 tours about Black Tudors in Westminster, City of London, and Southwark. I do a 2-part walking tour about the East India Company. I do a walking tour about Bloody Mary or Queen Mary I, so we go beyond the myth. I do a Tudor Queen sing-along walking tour. I'm doing a special with Claire Linney for children. It's a family adventure in Southwark where we look at the Black silk weaver called Reasonable Black Man. And also I'm doing a walk with Sir Loyal Hart, and that's a collaboration. We talk about the early life of Henry VIII. Going back to a standout moment, so I can remember, my East India Company walk, so as I said, it's 2 parts. The first part looks at its Tudor/Stuart origins, and the second part looks at the post sort of 1700s, and you've got people like Clive or Warren Hastings, and we look at how it becomes a dominion. And for me, that was really interesting because I didn't learn about the East India Company at school. And one of the sort of pivotal points in the East India Company's sort of turning point, becomes a dominion, is a few battles in the state of Bengal. And there's a battle called a Battle of Plassey. And that's when they defeat the Mughal and the Nawab in the area. And that leads to their dominance. And eventually they get something we call the Grant of Bengal. And it's a huge battle that Clive was actually involved in, and he led the forces. And during my walk, someone who came to my walk, one of his ancestors was actually fought in the Battle of Plassey with Clive. So that was like a huge wow moment, because you never expect someone who had an ancestor to, have fought in that battle. Another wow moment again in the East India Company was my friend Indra. He brought his cousin along from India, and he didn't mention she was a Maharaja princess. So it was a bit intimidating, me talking about the East India Company and, not pronouncing the names correctly and having her there. But she actually enjoyed it, and she said she learned stuff from it as well. So that was really nice. So the East India Company has provided some really interesting moments. And because I deliver these walks, you obviously become part of a community of people linked to the East India Company. And I've just met some wonderful people along the way. So there's a lady called Lisa Hannon, and she does walks, and she is the ex-governor of St. Helena, which was an East Indian Company territory as well. So very interesting.
The world is a small place, isn't it? It's a small place. I mean, it is really interesting what you've said, and especially considering how much ground you cover on your tours. Now, I imagine there are certain stories or aspects of history that really resonate with people, stories that might surprise or challenge what they think that they know, sort of thing. So, for example, when we think of the Tudors, certain narratives come to mind, but there are others, obviously. Now, lesser known figures that deserve just as much attention are the Black Tudors, which resonate, I know, much on your tours. Now, why was this information important for you to educate people on?
I think it all goes back to narrative, because being a person of colour, a Black woman myself, a lot of the stories and the histories just focus on transatlantic slavery. And the Tudor period is very unique because race, as we know, it hasn't been constructed. So you don't have sort of the rigid structure we have in terms of race. So you have people of colour living in Tudor London, or England rather, and they are part of their communities and parishes, and you had burial records, baptism records, and marriage records. And to be an integral part of society, you have to belong to your parish. So if you came from another parish, you were, treated as a stranger. So the fact that you are part of this parish, that means you're an integral part of that community. So for me, it was really strange because you have to unlearn everything that you know about race, because it doesn't actually exist in the form that we know it, because it's something that's constructed socially. So interesting when I talk about someone called Mary Phyllis, and she's a servant working for someone, and it says she's a servant. And when people look at the documentation, they still see enslaved person rather than servant. So I say, look, you have to think of, unfortunately, Paul Burrell, servant, getting paid a contract. So it's just trying to disassociate yourself with what we know now. Even things like the names we would term as racist now, but the names were literally describing that person. So the silk weaver, a reasonable Black man, we think he chose the name reasonable because silks were reasonable prices. Yeah. So it's strange things like that.
I mean, it must be amazing to share so many different aspects of history with people in such an interactive way. And I can imagine every tour has its own special moments and stories. So my question would be, and you probably already answered this one, but of all the tours you do right now, which is your personal favourite?
I would always, all of them will always have something very special that resonate with me. I love the Black Tudors because I love Tudor history. It was my first tours I did. But I'm someone who likes to quite excited about things, and my mind's always darting around. So it's always the tour that I'm working on. So the tour that I'm working on at the moment, I've just finished doing all the research, is Mary. So I did a collaboration with Amanda, who's an author based in New York, but I've now curated my own walk, a bit more detailed about Mary. And I think her life, I mean, she's known as Bloody Mary, and it's just a misrepresentation of the person who she was, just to be given this moniker, like Bloody Mary, when she is a very complex individual woman, the heartache she went through, just really misinterpreted and unfairly treated in history. So she really, at the moment, it's my favourite walk, my favourite person in history. And I just feel just the injustice, where she's just been misrepresented in history, and the stories about her have just all been constructed to just, she was this, ruthless, villainous monarch. I mean, there's so many aspects to her life that we don't know. The fact she was separated from her mother as a teenager and forbidden to see or speak to her, just not being allowed to be married by her father, just the fact that she's known as Bloody Mary because of the short reign, but lots of people were executed, and the rationale why she did it is never explained. And we don't look at her father, who killed between 50,000 and 75,000 people. Well, they were not killed, who were executed during his reign, compared to hers was about 280. So just how history
It is a strange one, that.
About women. Yeah, it's very strange.
It's strange why she got that title, Bloody Mary.
It came a little bit later. It came later under the stewards. It was like a Jacobi sort of term. And just the fact they used that. I mean, she doesn't even have a tomb. And she was the first queen in her own right in England. Yeah. So it's shocking, really.
Well, listening to your stories, it's clear how much you love bringing history to life for others. And it always makes me wonder, with all your knowledge and passion, if you ever found yourself daydreaming about stepping back into the past yourself. So if you could go back to a period of history, which would it be and why?
So it would be the Tudor period.
Right.
And the reason why is I just love the whole idea of people of colour living in Tudor England before the transatlantic slave trade, and just people being part of the community. And I would really love to meet, there was a needle maker that had a shop on Cheapside. And it's really funny because we don't know his name, but we know he existed because he's been chronicled in history as not wanting to share his trade secrets. So he's just known as being selfish. So I'd just love to know who he was and just see what he did. So it's amazing, like you're not known by your name, but you're known as, do you remember that selfish person that wouldn't share his trade secrets? So I'd love to see him. And during that period, there is a parish called St. Botolph's, and it sort of straddles the city of London and Aldgate. And Oneka Nubia, he's a historian, he's estimated that 1 in 12 people in that parish were black or Moors. So you had a sizable black community. So that would have been so interesting to just be there, see the people, have conversations with them. So I would love to go back to that time.
Amazing. I mean, how many black people do you think there were in the country around?
We don't know. Because race, the thing is, because race wasn't something that was actually defined, we are just lucky if it's written down in records. And sometimes the records don't correspond with each other. So, for instance, Reasonable Black Man, we know that he was black because he brought a communion token where he described himself as a black Moor. And then research done by historians they think he came from the Netherlands because during that period there was a civil war and between the Netherlands and the Spanish, and there were lots of refugees. And in one of the parishes, there was a sizable number of silk weavers from the Netherlands. So it sort of ties in. But if you look at other records, he's got his name is spelt differently. Sometimes he's called John Reasonable or John the Blackmore, but you really have to work hard. So it's really hard to know because, as I said, the documents aren't consistent. Race itself, I said, is not this construct. People who came from the Spanish and the Portuguese empires, because they were using enslaved labor, people tended to categorize themselves according to, where they came from in that society or their color. And that's the only reason we know that they are people of color. So it's so hard because at that time in Britain, we didn't have the racialization of society that you had in the Spanish and Portuguese empires. And just because people came across, they didn't always choose to use that classification. Sometimes they had it on documents, sometimes they didn't. So it's a lot of detective work trying to pin the pieces together. Going back to St. Barthol's, what Aneka has done is he actually analysed the records, burial records, marriage records, and he estimated what the actual population was in that particular parish. So, but there are lots of records across England as well of blackamoors, or sometimes use the word Negro.
I mean, the other thing is as well, there's no kind of paintings or artwork, is there, these people at the time?
The only one we have is of John Blank. So he's the only image we have of a Black Tudor. So he was a famous trumpeter, worked in the courts of Henry VII and Henry VIII. So he's like the poster boy of Black Tudors because that's the only image that we do have. So
it is fascinating. It's just fascinating.
It's very fascinating. And I just think it's really great to sort of share Britain's diverse history.
Yeah. And it does go back. You're right. It's a really good. It's a good debate, isn't it? If nothing else, you can talk about this for having a day, and it must be really difficult trying to find any sort of proof, I guess, about these people and who they were and what they did and everything else. But anyway, where can people find out more about your tours and more curriculum and any other social media sites that you'd like to share with us?
Okay, so as I said, I run More Curricula. More Curricula run study still courses, writing courses for children, and also walking tours for children as well as families. So More Curricula, just www.morecurricula.co.uk. There is a tab that will take you to hidden Tudor tours on that page as well, so rather on that site. If you're particularly interested in my walks, which I spent most of my time talking about, you would just look for Hidden Tudor Tours. Hidden Tudor Tours on Instagram, LinkedIn, and also Facebook. So just follow me on social media. I'll have a list of all the walks that we do. The walks, we do walks every weekend. So there is always something going on. It might be a Black Tudor walk. It might be something about Mary or the Tudor Queens or the East India Company. So I won't say the weekend, but this month we've got a lot of East India Company walks for September. But for October, it's Black History Month, and I'm doing lots of different events for Black History Month. So a lot linked to Black Tudors.
That's great.
And also I said, so that's what I'll be doing for October. But there will be some Tudor Queens in there as well.
Amazing. It's amazing. And don't forget, all Yvette's links will be in that description box down below. And I guess with that said, it's time to jump on the nearest bus, train, or any other mode of transport you can get out of London on and end our tour today. But thank you, Yvette, for taking the time to join me. And I do wish you every success in the future. And finally, one thing is for sure, being a tour guide must give you a really good time, always steering people in the right direction through history. And I don't write that. I didn't write that, honestly.
Fantastic. I just want to say thank you very much to you, John. And you've got a fantastic site. I love all the videos you share about historical figures. And I just want to say thank you very much for speaking to me and listening to me. And I do apologise for going on and on and on. Sometimes I do.
No, you're more than welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
It's all about you. It's not about me. I'm just here to ask the questions and everything. So we'll finish. And as always, to everyone, I guess, who's tuned in today, thank you so much. We've still got more incredible guests coming here on History Speaks. So if you love history, you'll love History Roadshow. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss any historical stories that we have. So until next time, keep exploring the past with us, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.